If you've been following along with our 4-part series on book sales, you have no doubt picked up one of the major themes of this series, and that is no book sells without author promotion. But unfortunately, this raises a lot of questions for our authors. Namely, what if you don't feel like an expert? How do you get out there and promote your story? Well, that's why today I want to wrap up our 4-part series on book sales by talking about how to promote your book even when you don't feel like an expert. Stay tuned. You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up. Today's topic comes from a question that was left on our YouTube channel. And quick reminder, anytime you have a question, something you'd like us to cover, drop it in a comment on the YouTube channel or email us. I'd love to have those ideas. But for today, I'm so grateful for this question because I think it gets at a contradiction that so many people feel when they're setting out to promote their first book. And that is, okay, sure, I get it. I wrote this book. I've got to be the one to promote it. But as you start digging into, well, how do I promote a memoir? You are no doubt coming up on advice that hinges on you being an expert. So often this will be things like keynote speeches, panel appearances, trainings, TikTok or Instagram reels, these kinds of things where we're sharing information. So what happens with so many authors is they come up against this crossroad. Yes, they need to promote their book, probably as an expert, and they don't feel like an expert at all. So how do we bridge the gap between someone who has written a memoir and someone who sees themselves as an expert? How do we take your personal story that you are writing into this book and leverage it into something that will get you these appearances and leverage to get in front of the audiences you want to get in front of? Well, today I want to talk through some of the ways that you can think about this issue to really get rid of the negative voices in your head, the restrictive thoughts, and really lean into places that feel really, really good. Places where you can embrace the fact that you are definitely an expert, you have nothing to justify, and in fact, you are ready right now to start promoting that book. Okay, but so before we get into it, I do want to give a little bit of a caveat, and that is that yes, promotion does require expertise. So just in case there was any kind of feeling in your mind that maybe there was a way around this, I do want to be really clear up front that there really isn't. When you are talking about nonfiction, and that includes both narrative nonfiction and what we might think of as prescriptive nonfiction, how to self-help, that kind of thing, you are going to need to be an expert as the author in order to get people to be interested in what you have to say in your book. So there is no way around this. And in fact, as a memoirist, this is a really, really common hurdle. When you are thinking about promoting your memoir, it's really, really easy to think that what the book is about is you. And of course, you are an expert in you, but that often feels like it kind of falls short in terms of advice. So I do want to talk about how you can get to the place of feeling like an expert, but I did just want to start out by saying this is a journey that you will need to take. If you want to successfully promote your memoir, meaning you want your memoir to sell copies, you are going to need to find a way to embrace that expertise. You can do it. And I want to talk today about how you can figure out what that place in you that feels like an expert is so that you can tap in any time you need to get the word out about your book. Okay, so let's dig in. And I want to start by talking about what exactly we mean by expertise. And the reason is, I think this is going to kind of help give us a little bit of a framework. And from that framework, you're going to be able to look at your own project much more objectively. And I think that's going to help you kind of get a kickstart, get a head start on what the topics of expertise you might be able to offer actually are. Okay, so I want to talk about what expertise is from the perspective of someone who is pretty verifiably an expert. And the way that I felt that I could verify my expertise many years ago was getting a PhD. So when you get a PhD, I just want to talk a little bit about the process, because I do find that most people will accept that someone with a PhD is an expert. And yet, there are gaps in this way of thinking. Okay, so first of all, let me kind of give you a little bit of a peek behind the scenes. If you don't have an advanced degree, I often find that people will assume that the training that goes into something like a PhD is sort of a continuation of K through 12 education or even undergrad education. With a PhD, that is actually not the case. So depending on your field, there are different ways that this might look, but as a social scientist, I can tell you that my experience was we did about 2 years worth of coursework. So this was classes. This would be sort of similar to undergrad, although the expectation is that when you come into your seminar, into your coursework, you are coming in with your own ideas. You are bringing your own kind of challenges or enhancements to the topics you're talking about. You are not being simply instructed. So already, even before you have started that PhD program, you are being looked at as more and more of an expert. But that coursework usually does not last beyond 2 years. It didn't for me, certainly. At the end of that coursework, now you have a whole entire 2 additional years in which you are not even sitting in front of a professor. During those 2 years, at least in my experience, we started with our comprehensive exams. That meant we had to take tests over everything we had studied in those first 2 years, just to verify that we had gotten the information that we needed. But then the fun starts. Then comes the dissertation, and that's what I want to talk about today, because I often find that people who have not been through this process of writing a thesis or writing a dissertation, there's often kind of an assumption that there is much more input from others, that you are kind of being bestowed as an expert by people gifting you this information. So that's actually not true at all. In fact, how the process works is you essentially write a book, your dissertation, on a topic of interest to you. And the point is actually not to regurgitate the things that other people have talked about already. The point is for you to add your own insights. You cannot get a PhD. You will not pass that dissertation defense if you are not contributing your own ideas. And here's why I want to bring this up, because even though we do think of a dissertation as something different than a book, and it is, of course, there's something that I find gets lost in translation here that is really, really important. And that is something that my mentor said to me as I was walking into my dissertation defense. She said, "Remember, you know more about this topic than anyone else in that room." And that is true. The reason I've spent a year thinking about that topic deeply, right? I had thought about it from every angle. I had come up on the challenges of writing about it, of analyzing it, studying it, understanding it, and I had pushed through those challenges. I had come out with much, 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 much more than just simply learning about what other people had said before. And that is what it means to be an expert. To be an expert, you are gathering, yes, what other people have said and thought. That is true, but that is a tiny piece of the pie. Most of expertise is actually getting the groundwork and the confidence to make a contribution, to say something new that helps the world see this topic in a new particular way. And the reason I bring that up is that if you are writing or have written a memoir, you have essentially done a dissertation on whatever it is you went through. I know that you did not get to the end of writing that draft without having spent hours and hours and hours thinking deeply about the topic of your memoir. And yes, that is you, but there's something much, much more. And that's in fact the second point I want to make here. Often I find that a big misstep, besides misunderstanding what expertise is that a lot of people will come into the promotional stage of their memoir assuming that the most important contribution they are making is their story. Now, this is a key reason, by the way, in our group program, the Memoir Method, which Short plug, come and join us if you are a message and values driven woman who is trying to get through that draft or revision of your memoir. We would love to support you. Check it out at pageandpodium.com/memoir-method. But within that program, we very intentionally ask participants to separate out their topic from their message. And there's a really important reason that we do this. When we talk about topic, what we're talking about is the specific thing that you have gone through. So that can be anything from a divorce, adopting a child, a big career advancement, taking a big leap in business or similar. It can be something like overcoming a medical crisis or some kind of a financial devastation, any number of a range of things. But your topic is the thing you went through. Your message, on the other hand, is the thing you want to say about that topic. So oftentimes, as I've talked about in this channel before, scroll back down if you want more conversation about a message, because we do have a video called Do You Know Your Memoirs Message? But within that message, we're often thinking about these kind of umbrella truths or umbrella pieces of advice. So let me give you an example. Just the other day in our group program, we had one of our members workshopping what her message might be. And she was thinking about things like, you can overcome anything if you have that grounding and faith in God. That is an excellent message, right? She's inspiring people. She's empowering people. It is a general enough message that many, many people can connect to it. But it's also specific enough that it allows her to pull that topic in and use the message to explain what the purpose of the topic is. Now, if you think back to how I was just talking about expertise through a dissertation, through having a PhD, you will see exactly what I'm getting at here, right? When you write a dissertation, when you get that expert credential in that particular understanding of a credential, the thing that you are doing is choosing a topic, thinking deeply about it from every single angle and every point of view, and then coming out on the other side and saying, here is what this means. Well, what is that if it's not a memoir? We sit and we think about who we are, what we have lived through, what we came out of these experiences, both knowing and still uncertain of. How did we get through that? And then on the other side, we have this piece of advice. We have this message for others. It's exactly the same thing. And the reason I bring that up is that people will often misunderstand the value of their book. While your story is important, the success of your story in the market sense, the success in terms of it reaches the people that you want to reach, and it helps them learn and grow in the way that you want them to learn and grow, that does not hinge on the drama of the story. That instead hinges on your clarity of message. The message is really the thing that your reader or your audience is going to take with them after they read the book. Your story might be dramatic, sure, but that is rarely the thing that your reader is going to take away. And I want to give you an example, and it is probably my very favorite memoir of all times. It is written by Sarah Smarsh, and this book is called Heartland. So shout out to Sarah. She is from very, very close to my hometown. And many of the things that she's writing about, things like Midwestern working class and Midwestern kind of poverty experiences, she's thinking about how politics get projected onto what we sometimes people will call the flyover states. Close to my heart, but people call them that. How does politics get kind of projected onto the flyover states, onto the Bible Belt? How do we kind of think about the complexity or the simplicity of people's lives in these places that many people have never been, and in fact, in these places where there's a lot of hidden strength in the kind of culture and the heritage and the tradition? How do we think about those things? So that's what Sarah's thinking about in Heartland, and I can tell you, the story is just simply a coming of age story. The story is not dramatic really at all. But when I read this book, I was so moved, and the reason is not the story. The reason is that the message so resonated with me. And this is, in fact, how Sarah promoted her book. She went around the country not talking about her childhood in so much as she was just sharing the step-by-step story, but rather she was talking about her childhood as a way to advance her expertise, as a way to share what she knows to be true about the culture she grew up in, about these so-called flyover states, about working class kind of mentality and motion forward, and the way that the working class in her area understands their role in the larger political society. Well, that is fascinating. And also, when this book came out around the time of the first Trump election, this was something that people were hungry to learn from. Sarah's a journalist. Her expertise is not in working class culture, except that it is. Because not only did she grow up there, she also spent hundreds of hours combing back through her story to figure out what it meant. And I bet you have done that too. Now, of course, not everyone will see Sarah Smarsh as an expert in Midwest working class culture. That just simply is the case. Some people will want different types of credentials to acknowledge someone's expertise. And that is the next point that I want to make. What do we do with the fact that we know that not everyone will acknowledge our expertise literally no matter what we do? Well, of course, what we don't do is throw the baby out with the bathwater and decide that we're not experts. Instead, what I want you to do is one of the biggest trends in the book industry right now, and that is niche down. In fact, I pretty recently gave a talk on some of the trends in memoir publishing at the traditional level. And one of the things that became so clear to me is that we do still have celebrity memoirs, but it used to just be celebrities versus everybody else. Now what we are seeing is just as much as celebrity memoirs, we are seeing micro niche experts. And what that means for you is if you can step up and claim your expertise to a particular audience on a particular topic and message, you have such a better shot of tapping into all of the same resources that traditional publishers have, regardless of how you're planning to publish. So let me give you an example of this. We had a client, this has been a few years ago now, who had been a caregiver, an elder caregiver, as she was starting a business. So this was a really hairy time in her life. She was starting a consulting business, and at the same time, her parents had moved much closer to her, although of course not in the same town. They were like an hour away, but they had moved much closer to her, and she was doing this entire dance of not only getting the business going, not only raising her own children, being with her own family, but also stepping into this elder care role. Now, by the time she came to talk to us, this had been happening for a really long time, and she had a really excellent handle on what it meant to provide elder care while also providing care to your own investment, your business, and providing care to your own family, your children. But some people would undoubtedly say that she is not an expert in elder care, right? Now, I know that sounds strange because what I just said is that she was doing this very hard thing while doing a bunch of other stuff. How would she not be an expert? But there are some people who are going to say, well, if she wants to talk about elder care, then she should have a degree in something related to that. She should be a nurse or a doctor. There should be some kind of medical component. Or maybe she should be a social scientist with an expertise on the best strategies for ensuring that elder care is effective. And all those people would be experts too. But the point that I want to make here is that when she brought her expertise forward, what her expertise actually was how do we make elder care work in the midst of such a busy life? And let me tell you who cannot talk about that. It's the expert who has the social science degree in the best, most efficient strategies for elder care. That person is not going to be the expert on how to balance a very full life with this additional commitment. That person can't do that. The nurse, the doctor, the person with the medical background on elder care, they can't talk about that. That is not their expertise. And what that means is we've got to think about who it is not only that is interested in your topic, but who it is that will see you as an expert. Because what I can tell you is that other business owners, particularly women business owners, will fall all over themselves to get this information about how you find the balance. And in fact, She has a thriving business teaching people to do that. So when we're thinking about expertise, the niching down is not just a marketing strategy. It is an actual way to tap into the most valuable aspects of your message and topic. When we think about who am I an expert to, and in what way am I an expert, we get such a more clear picture than if we say, am I an expert or not? All of us are experts in some things, and all of us are not experts in other things. And with all of those things, we are only ever going to be experts to some people. So the more we niche down, the more we hit the audience that appreciates and wants what we have to say. And that is a match made in heaven. So now that we have this kind of mindset shift in place, we're really thinking about what it means to be an expert on your book. I want to add just one more piece of complexity, one more kind of question for you as you're moving forward. And that is, what is the message that will have the most impact? Now, if you are somebody who is in the memoir method in our group program, you have workshopped this already. We know that the message is the absolute most important thing to get that book promotion successful and make sure that you're getting that book out there. But when we think about the message, I do find that people will often trip themselves up, particularly at the point that they are taking their message from being a scaffold for their book to making their message a scaffold for their expertise and their reach. So the thing that I want to add to this conversation is this concept of the curse of expertise. Now, I've talked a lot about this on this YouTube channel and podcast, particularly our older episodes, and I want to kind of resurrect this concept because it is so important when we're talking about expertise in a memoir context. Now, there's a couple different ways we can think about the curse of expertise. The more traditional way to think of it is that in the curse of expertise, we know all these very complicated concepts, but we can't explain them simply. We kind of forget that we know much, much more than other people, and that means that we aren't really able to translate what we know to a more lay audience. But I like to take this and kind of twist it just a little bit because there's an additional curse of expertise that kind of falls by the wayside when we think about it in terms of translation. And that is that the other curse of expertise is that you forget you're an expert. And if you have been on the internet in the past 20 years, you have no doubt heard this concept referred to as the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Now, oftentimes we will use this, and particularly snarky people on the internet will use this to say that the people that know the least will often be the most confident about the way that they're talking about a particular concept. But the Dunning-Kruger effect actually has, I think, a much more fascinating meaning, and that is that you can be a total expert and think that you have a lot more to learn before you would ever dare to step in front of an audience and call yourself an expert. And unfortunately, in most cases, the more you learn, the less you think you know. And I want you to kind of have that in your mind, because what often happens is that when we have that curse of expertise, when we get hit with that Dunning-Kruger effect, one thing that will happen very often is that a message that sounded so good to us, the message that really was the authentic, genuine meaning we wanted to get out there, suddenly sounds kind of dumb. And the reason I bring that up is I want you to resist that feeling. The most important thing any of us can do for ourselves during the marketing and promotion period of a book's release is really hold on to what we wanted to say. It is such a natural impulse, and it is so pervasive in our culture to switch away and try to figure out the thing that you think everyone will resonate with, the thing that sounds smarter, or the thing that's grabbier, or the thing that's timelier. And all of those are the wrong impulse. Unfortunately, no matter how you try to adapt to a market of everyone, you will never, ever satisfy the market of everyone, no matter how you try to adapt. And the result of trying to adapt is often the most milquetoast messages that anyone has ever put out there. These are not messages that are inspired but simple. These are messages that are just obvious. And the reason I want to call that to your attention is that the you who was combing through your stories, the you who was becoming an expert by looking back at your past and figuring out what it meant, that version of you is the expert. When we second guess ourselves, we start to imagine that every other memoirist, every other person advertising in our niche, those are the experts, and I should just say what they're saying. And nothing could be further from the truth. The you that is the expert needs to be the you that promotes the book. And that means you have got to hold on tight to what that big idea is, to what the meaning of your story is, to what your message is. So I want to leave you with one last piece of advice, and that is that we all have days where we just feel poopy. And on the day that you do not feel like an expert, that you are down on yourself, that you don't believe that you have anything interesting to say, you don't believe you have the capacity to say it, on that day, I want you to rest. There is nothing worse than feeling at the end of your rope in that way, feeling like you have nothing left to give and making yourself keep giving. So instead of that, when you have one of those days, when you feel kind of low, I want you to revisit the beginning of your project. What did you know at the beginning of the project? I bet it was so much less than you know now. When you came up with that message, when that message felt good to you and you drew a line in the sand and you said, this is what I have to say, what was that feeling like? Hold on to the things you know because you are an expert. You are. But it's going to be hard to see that. And particularly the closer you move to having that book in people's hands, the more likely you are to stray from this truth that I really want you to hold close to your heart. You have something really valuable to share. You can get it out there because you are an expert. Okay, wherever you are in the writing or promotion or sales period, I hope that you are having an enjoyable time, and I hope that you are feeling like you can tap into the creativity and the inspiration that made you want to complete this project in the first place. I promise you've got something big to say. So let's go say it. Happy writing. You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club. Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group.